All right. Hello, everyone, and thank you for attending. My name is Daniel West, and today I will be discussing the Homeland of Things framework. All right, so a quick bio on myself. I'm a Cyber Operations NCO here at Fort Gordon in the U.S. Army. I'm also a graduate student at Penn State in the Homeland Security program and College of Information Sciences and Technology. I'm originally from LA, not the California type, so Lower Alabama. Hey, Klaus, how you doing? So I started working with computers about 20 years ago when my grandfather built my first workstation out of some spare parts he got from his college. And then from there, I just played around with the computer because I didn't have anything better to do. We had a couple bootleg games, but that was about it. So I learned how to fix the computer myself, and my teachers frequently pulled me out of class to fix their computers for them. And then since then, I've gotten a wide knowledge base of from anything from cybersecurity to information assurance and IT. So originally, what sparked my interest in the IoT was my trip to Hamburg at the Chaos Communication Congress. So I came back from there and I was like, why is there so many problems with this thing called the IoT? And I had never heard of the IoT prior to this. So I went out and I researched and I learned more about the IoT. And then one of my previous bosses was like, hey, you should ask more questions and seek more answers and then try to build some kind of product to actually do something about it. So a fun fact about me, I love jamming out to EDM music with my daughter. We love dancing around in the living room on Saturdays and Sundays. No videos of that, of course, online. All right, so a quick disclaimer. So the Homeland of Things framework is not affiliated with the U.S. government. You're going to see a lot of U.S. government doctrine in here that's cited. However, it's completely separate. This is all from publicly available information, so everything that you see in here, you can go out and pull down yourself. And all of my opinions in here are mine, of course, and they're not opinions that reflect what the U.S. Army says or what any other U.S. government entity says. All right, so a few acknowledgements. So Michael and Sonny were my fellow classmates at Penn State that helped me to write the HoT framework as part of a paper for our information security management course. Dr. M, he allowed us to write this framework and had no objections. It was a little beyond what was required for our paper, so it was, it was overboard. But a lot of my classmates at Penn State, they want to do what it takes to get it done, not necessarily go the extra mile. So I was really appreciative to both Michael and Sonny that they allowed me to expand a little bit further and pursue my dream of doing something about the IoT. All right, my Cyber Syndicates family, Keelan and Alex, both of these guys have mentored me for quite some time. Keelan spoke last year here at BSides, and Alex spoke the last 2 years. I saw them come up here and talk, and it really helped me to want to come up here and actually speak before you today. So, Dr. McGee. So, Dr. McGee's my current boss. He's been quite a leader. So, sometimes you'll meet some of these folks that their credentials, they define who they are. That's not the case with Dr. McGee. He puts all that aside and he allows collaboration to occur between him and his subordinates. So I really appreciate him. And the boss that I was talking about that I previously had, who helped me to actually go out and do some research, was Scott Smith. I want to tip the hat to him as well. So Aditya, he runs the Pen Tester Academy IoT exploitation course. I've never met him personally, but I want to thank him for making that course publicly available and very cheap for us to go out and get some training on IoT security. It's very accessible. And then the OIC IoT Project, Daniel and Craig, I've never met either one of these guys either. However, I want to thank them because without them, the HoT framework wouldn't be what it is today. And then my family and friends, I want to thank them. They allow me to pursue my crazy projects, and they don't give me grief about it. They don't. My wife, she knows that I'm sitting up till 1:30 in the morning working on one of these things, and she just falls asleep, turns over the other way, and lets the light she ignores it. So I'm thankful for that. And then the BSidesAugusta organizers, specifically Mark Baggett. I ran into him last year after I had written the original HoT framework, and he told me, he said, you need to come up to BSides and you need to give a talk on this. And I was like, me? Get in front of people and talk? There's no way in hell I'm doing that. No way. So you can see I'm a little bit nervous, and I'm kind of a stick in the shadows kind of guy and get things done from there. So I want to extend that thanks to him. And then Lawrence, of course. I've known Lawrence for a couple of years now, and he's always been very helpful in providing me some knowledge and feedback on what I'm doing. All right, so the goals of the HoT framework. So number one, we want to bridge the gap between the Department of Homeland Security's strategic principles for securing the Internet of Things and then the tactical application or user application. So there's a gap that exists there. So DHS says do these great things and you'll be secure. However, how do you get there? That didn't exist. So number two, I wanted to prevent adversaries being able to use IoT botnets to attack critical infrastructure. That was something that was near and dear to me. And then want to promote awareness so people understand the issues with IoT security. However, at the same time, I don't want people to just say, I'm not going to use IoT, I'm not going to have a smart home, I'm not going to get connected, because that's not the right route to go either. Innovation is good. Getting connected is good. All right, as I stated before, the HoT framework started as a paper. So we were all interested in the IoT because we had heard the buzzword before. So we went and we actually did the research. However, some of the stuff that we came back with was a little outlandish. Has anybody in here heard of stealthy dopant level Trojans? Anybody? Yeah, exactly. So it's a little out there. This stuff exists. It is possible to manipulate devices and create backdoors at them at the logic level. So like at the hardware, manipulating the amount of dopant that's on a logic gate itself. However, the only way that you can actually discover this stuff is with an electron scanning microscope, which I'm sure not a whole lot of people have laying around their house or their organization. So I had to dump that when I revamped the HoT framework this year. All right, so the current HoT framework consists of 37 unique target areas of interest and 20 attack surfaces. This totals to about 96 TAIs across 20 attack surfaces and 3 layers of cyberspace. So the current approach is actionable and it is tactical. It is open source and industry and device independent. And I'm hoping it will be dynamic and it will actually react to the changes in the IoT ecosystem and the threat itself. So it will also be community driven if I can get help from all of you and then others out there that are interested. So I haven't completed all the TAIs yet, but I will be completing them over the next few months with what information that I have. However, back to it being evolving and being dynamic, it's going to change, so it'll never be in a complete state ever. And I'm using Gitbook right now because it's easy for me to push and pull updates back and forth, and also it allows you guys to go and comment, and then for me to get that comment as an issue, then I'm able to go and reintegrate what you put in there immediately. All right, so there's several key pieces, several foundations to what makes the HoT framework what it is today. Not one to really read it off the slides, but I wanted to make sure that you guys had all of this on here. So the HoT framework combines a strategic understanding of the IoT within cyberspace and U.S. government doctrine, the OWASP IoT Project, comprehensive vulnerability definitions, the NIST framework for improving critical infrastructure cybersecurity, known CVEs, known IoT intrusions, attacks and use cases, and analysis tools, training, and TTPs. So it's a lot of stuff. So before we go any further, we need to define some of these terms. All these buzzwords, they're great, They're great when you want to get money, just like cyber. You yell out cyber and money comes flowing in. Trust me. So the IoT, typically it processes data, is connected and interacts, or does some kind of sensing of its environment. I read one IEEE paper that said that there is no universally accepted definition of what the IoT is. So it went as far as to say that current definitions vary so much that they are reminiscent of the old story of the blind man and the elephant, leaning towards the partiality that people have. If you're blind and you're feeling an elephant, you have one perception different than another blind man feeling that elephant. All right, so embedded systems are typically a small computer system that is designed for a specific purpose and part of a larger computer system. ICS SCADA, I'm sure everybody in this room has heard of ICS SCADA at this point. ICS SCADA, or industrial control systems and supervisory control and data acquisition systems, are responsible for controlling a wide variety of functions in industrial equipment. On the next slide, you'll see something called IIoT, the Industrial Internet of Things. So that's the new lingo for ICS SCADA. Cyber physical systems. Cyber physical systems are engineered systems that are built from and depend upon the seamless integration of computational algorithms and physical components. They're highly interactive with their physical environment. And then machine-to-machine communications are exactly that. They're the communications that are directly between machines. And this has actually been going on for a very, very long time, since, when I say the 1960s. And an IoT ecosystem. I looked for several hours for a definition of what the IoT ecosystem was, and I couldn't find one single paper that gave me a straightforward definition. So it was even worse than finding a definition of the IoT. So I came up with my own, and I basically defined it as a conglomeration of all the IoT assets, applications, data, and communications interacting with one another in cyberspace and externally with the physical environment. All right, so these are some of those terms that have been created recently. Hopefully that's not too hard to see. My favorite one on there is the Internet of People. I don't get that Internet of what the Internet of People is supposed to be, but that was one of those terms that are out there. One of the most interesting ones to me, being in the Army, is the Internet of Battle Things. There's good papers that are published out there about the IOBT, specifically from the Army Research Lab, and it's publicly available, and you can go read it. All right, so another key piece of the HoT framework is understanding the layers of cyberspace. This is something that's been debated several times. Some people say there's 3 layers, some people say there's 5 layers, some people say there's 7, 9. There's all kind of definitions for this particular slide right here. So just know that JP 3-12 is the ultimate source, joint publication 3-12. It's the ultimate source for understanding what the layers of cyberspace are for us in the DoD. So that's what I'm using as my source to define what these layers are. So the physical network layer is typically defined as the geographic component where the network resides, and physical network components comprise of hardware, system, software, and infrastructure that support the network. So when they're talking about networks, you got to think a little bit further than just TCP/IP networks. So a network can be a CAN bus network in a car, for example. A network can be a Modbus network between a master and slave PLC and an industrial control system. And I'm not talking about Modbus over TCP/IP. I'm just talking about Modbus over the serial links. So another important thing that JP 3-12 doesn't actually elaborate on is the fact that a device doesn't actually have to be connected for cyber effects to be applied. You can apply cyber effects over the electromagnetic spectrum to a device without actually having any connection, any sustained connection to a network. It's interesting. So the logical network layer, there's this whole, the definition really doesn't make sense to me. So basically, what our team did in the original paper was equate the logical network layer to where the cloud is. So that was just the general understanding. Cloud is here, and anything else that that would allow an otherwise geographically disparate node to logically replicate a physical connection. So if you're here and your server is in Asia somewhere, and the connection appears as if you're in one network, like a virtual private network, then that would be something that would reside at the logical network layer. And then the cyber persona layer. A cyber persona is essentially just a projection of a persona into cyberspace. It's the people on the network. That's it. All right, so going back to CIMA. So this is cyber electromagnetic activities. This is essentially the consummation of electronic warfare and cyberspace operations. All right. The important thing here to understand with the IoT is the fact that the IoT has a vast amount of protocols and frequencies that are used, as you can see up there in the Postscapes image. And we've been doing Wi-Fi and Bluetooth penetration testing for over a decade now. So it's really not anything new. You have to use different devices to interact with it, so you're not just going to use one of these up here that I'll be throwing at y'all here soon. One of these alpha cards. You're going to have to use something a little bit different, maybe a software-defined radio, or maybe you're going to order some kind of device that is specifically used for one of these protocols. So, for example, Dr. McGee, in his study for his doctorate, he demonstrated the ability for an attacker to manipulate a smart home security system using the Z-Wave protocol. And in this example, he was actually able to peer with the security system itself with his laptop, and he was able to tell the security system to disable itself, and he was able to enter his home, steal some things, and then rearm the security system as if nobody had been there. So this, to me, falls in the realm of what cyber electromagnetic activities are. There's a lot more to it than that, but at the basic level, this is CIMA. All right, so the bottom line here. I really want this to soak in for everyone. We need to just put all the hype to the side, and we need to focus on the fact that no matter what the buzzwords are, you have a computing asset, it's made of hardware and software, and it can have cyber effects applied. When we're talking about the HoT framework, we're talking about securing at the device level, right? So I don't care if it's your smart home security system, or if it's a thermostat, or if it's a PLC. You can do the same exact things to them. All right, so the actual doctrine that I was discussing before, when we wrote the original HoT framework, there was no doctrine out that was specifically targeting the IoT. When we finished our paper, around the exact time we finished, that's when DHS released their strategic principles for securing the Internet of Things. I was like, oh man, so now we have this whole new thing that we could have used during the writing of our paper. So what I did was I stepped back and I actually used it to write the newer version. And this is basically, these are the 6 principles that the DHS Strategic Principles covers. The ones with the green plus sign next to them, those are the things that are mapped into the HoT framework itself. The red ones, they really lie at the manufacturer level. So how, for the promote transparency across the IoT, it's concerned with how is the manufacturer sourcing their hardware. Are they buying them from China, backdoored? They need to look into that themselves. That's not really something you at the user level can do anything about without special equipment. You can do something about it, but it's kind of outside the scope right now of what I'm trying to get at. So incorporate security at the design phase. That's definitely outside of the scope of what the user can do because you're not designing the IoT device. And then connect carefully and deliberately. That's up to you. So you have to make the decision on whether or not your IoT device needs to be connected. So do you have to have Alexa plugged in all the time? No, probably not. I mean, I do sometimes. I'll let her stay plugged in for 2 days straight, but it's not really necessary. If you want to interact with Alexa on a daily basis throughout your day, okay. But if you're just going to, interact with Alexa for a few moments, then probably keep her unplugged. All right, so the IoT Cybersecurity Improvement Act, this came out last month. So this is going to address some of those manufacturer level problems that we can't really do anything about as users. However, they only did this for the federal government. One of the things I learned while I was doing my research was that the Federal Trade Commission, they wanted to be kind of hands-off with actually going out and regulating the IoT and forcing manufacturers to incorporate certain principles into how they were designing their devices up front. So this was done because they want them to be able to quickly innovate and deliver a device to the market. So without anything regulating these manufacturers, there's a lot of opportunities for them to deliver a product to you that is very vulnerable. So the OIC IoT Project, again, this is one of the foundations for the HoT framework. So I did some changes from the OIC IoT project itself. I removed some of the vulnerabilities that they had in there because they were redundant. So I collapsed them or aggregated them into one CWE category. And then there was some attack surfaces that I didn't believe were attack surfaces. So like privacy, I thought that should come out. So I took it out of the HoT framework. So the FICIC, one of the things I talked to a couple of folks about when I was incorporating this into the HoT framework, that it says critical infrastructure in here, but you can use this for more than just critical infrastructure, okay? So it builds from existing standards that are already out there and actually maps those standards into the framework core itself. And it is technology neutral, and it provides a common taxonomy to be able to essentially describe your cybersecurity posture and where you want to go with your cybersecurity posture, and then how you go about assessing your improvement, and then how to actually relay that information to stakeholders. All right, so I'm going to talk just briefly about the IoT threat landscape, specifically with malware and botnets. All right, so far, these are this is the malware and botnets that I've researched and I've actually been able to incorporate into the HoT framework. There are other ones out there, I'm sure, that I haven't found yet. And so keep that up for one more second because I'm going to ask a question from this. All right. So the key takeaway from these examples is understanding where the threats are currently focused. So out of those examples, 63% were directed at password or credential management vulnerabilities. It's a lot. And you're talking about vulnerabilities that have been around for 20 years. So hard coding passwords into devices or having default passwords on your device, that shouldn't be existing anymore, but a lot of these manufacturers are doing it for ease of use for the user. All right, so you can see that 31% were injection attacks and then 6% were insecure third-party tools. So this really demonstrates the need for some kind of IoT security. Really, it should start with the manufacturer, but we can't rely on the manufacturer to do something about it. All right, so here's another example of a SEMA-related attack that occurred demonstration, really, of an attack that occurred this year. So Shield demonstrated how to do how to use DVB-T, or digital video broadcasting terrestrial, to essentially push commands to your TV and then tell your TV to go and pull a web page from his website that had exploits sitting on there waiting for you. Okay, so and then once those exploits were pulled back down to your TV's browser, boom, you have root on the box, or he had root on the box, and then he could go and manipulate the firmware, put backdoors into it, and then he could also make it to where the backdoors would be persistent across firmware updates. So you may be asking, well, how can I actually defend against this because it comes across DVB-T? Well, you could actually monitor your network itself, and you could see that your browser was communicating out and pulling down that web page. So there's other use cases out there. I've seen some good ones from Black Hat, some good ones from Chaos, some good ones from DEF CON. I want to incorporate these in as well. The GPAC's a good example of this. All right, so let's actually get to HoT now. All right, so this slide and the next 4 slides map the TAIs to each attack surface and each attack surface to the layer of cyberspace. Can you guys see that? I know it's, yeah. Yeah, probably shouldn't have done black, huh? All right. So I've also went and broken down the cyberspace layers into sublayers. For this particular slide, this sublayer will be hardware and firmware. So you have the device firmware, device physical interfaces such as JTAG and UART. And then you have device memory, local data storage, and sensors. And of course, I have supply chain on there. I haven't built any TAIs for it. But if you really think about it, you can use any of these attack surfaces at the supply chain. So it really is, it could, there we go. Thank you. Sweet. That's great. Now I can stay in the shadows. Okay, so the next stop up the physical network layer is the application sublayer. So here you have device network services, and from the device network services, OWASP pulled out the administrative interface and device web interface, which is no surprise because OWASP is focused on web applications. So of course they're going to pull out the web applications and put them standalone. And it's also a big attack surface anyways, so it makes sense. All right, so you also have mobile applications. However, the mobile application isn't typically on the device itself. It's on your phone, and you're interacting with the IoT device within your local network. I thought about taking this out, but it's basically an extension of the IoT device. It could be up in the cloud layer, but not really. So I just decided to go ahead and leave it here for now. If anybody can give me feedback on where they think it should be, I can change it. All right, and then the update mechanism. So this isn't focused on updating your device. It's focused on vulnerabilities with the update mechanism itself. And the next layer is the communication layer. So I added in from the OWASP IoT project, the device, RF, and wireless interfaces. They had this underneath a different attack surface, but I went ahead and brought it out as its own. And if you really think about it, this exists at both the hardware and the communications layer. So you can attack the RF spectrum itself, or you can attack the protocols that are running across the RF spectrum. All right. And then you have network traffic, which is essentially the same. For ecosystem communication and ecosystem general, you have the same types of TAIs across them. I thought about collapsing ecosystem general and ecosystem communications together, but I wasn't sure exactly why OWASP brought these two apart. So I need to talk to somebody that knows a lot about ecosystem communications and figure out what the best way forward with doing that is. Okay, so the cloud. So the first 2 attack surfaces here are focused on APIs. So that's the data going back and forth between the device and some application up in the cloud itself, or some service that's up in the cloud. The last one is focused on the cloud web interfaces. So whenever you're assessing the cloud web interfaces or anything that exists up in the cloud, you have to be cognizant of the fact that this stuff doesn't actually, it may not belong to you. So if you're using another provider's cloud service that connects to your IoT device, like Amazon, for example, you can't just go up there and just start scanning stuff and using Hydra to test passwords. You might get a phone call, you might get somebody in a suit come to your house. I mean, the possibilities are endless there, but make sure that it's not a violation of your terms of use to be doing something like that. Okay, and then the cyber persona layer. So right now, I have user awareness and psychosocial up here. This is a research adventure for me to figure out exactly how I'm going to work this one out. So in the original HoT framework, we discussed the possibility of future devices having artificial intelligence and basically having their own cyber persona and what that would look like. But right now, we're focused on the user's interaction with the IoT device itself and their projection into cyberspace. Okay, so now we're going to go over a HoT TAI. And these are the parts that we're going to go over individually. So part 1, it contains the vulnerability summaries made up of the MITRE common weakness enumeration and OWASP, their testing framework. All right, so this particular this part of the TAI maps back to build on recognized security practices from the DHS Security Principles. Here we have an overall risk assessment that consists of the technical impacts, business impacts, detectability, prevalence, and exploitability. This is also this risk assessment also comes from the attacks themselves and how prevalent these attacks are. And then you can see this which principle down below this one maps back to. All right, and then the attack surfaces grouped by layer of cyberspace. This just maps your does exactly that, which maps your attack services back to the layer of cyberspace. All right, so I wanted to just call this cyber threat intelligence, but it's not quite that yet. So I just put known intrusion, exploit, attack cases, because an intrusion and an attack are not the same thing. We all know that. But right now you can see Mirai. I always mess up how you say that properly, but Rickerbot and some other ones you can see on this screen, where there's a lot more just for this HoT TAI that have utilized credential management vulnerabilities in order to gain their initial entry onto a device. Okay, so the part 5 really acts like a checklist. So it informs the operator, the organization, the individual of which particular FICIC functions and then the sub functions underneath that they will meet by actually going and doing part 6, which is the actual implementation of those functions. And then part 6 is the analysis tools and training. So this goes function by function and walks you down. It's not super granular, but it says like, hey, you can test for telnet weak passwords with telnet using Hydra, for example. And on the left side of the screen, this was the password list that Mirai used when it was first launched, and some of the subsequent botnets, they use the same password list. So you can take this and you can pull out the usernames and then pull out the passwords and import those into Hydra, and then you can test your devices at home or at work or whatever. All right, and then the last 2 parts are a link. Basically, you click on this link and it'll take you to that CWE that was referenced in part 1 on the NIST NVD, or National Vulnerability Database. Pull up the vulnerabilities, the actual CVEs that are out there for that vulnerability. Right now, there's no IoT specific checkbox that you can check and pull up IoT specific CVEs. However, there was some language in the IoT Improvement Act that discusses them being able to do that. And I'm thinking about just sending an email to NIST and asking them if they would be interested in putting that into NVD. All right, and then the last part is just the references, so we don't want to plagiarize anybody else's work. Okay, so just with that one TAI, you have gone through all of these attack surfaces at the end. Okay, so you've assessed that vulnerability across all of these attack surfaces and these layers of cyberspace. Right now I have respond and recover grayed out because I don't have respond and recover built into this particular TAI yet, and really that's going to be inherited from your response and recovery plan anyways. So if you want to go do this at home, just go home, test your password, your individual attack surfaces out, test the passwords, and then combine that with a firmware update today, and you've already decreased your risk significantly. All right, so you actually have to build an approach from the TAIs. Not every organization or individual is going to have the same resources and capabilities. So you're going to actually have to go out and figure out what capabilities do I have, what resources do I have available to me. And then once you figure that out, then you can pull out the TAIs individually that you're going to go in and actually utilize. So this is also going to be prioritized based upon risk. What individual threats exist for your organization? So shortfalls and way aheads. So there is definitely a lot of room for improvement. There's a lot of things that I can do to improve it, but really I need community input. That's the ultimate goal here, is I need more folks to come in and help me to build this thing better than what it is today. So one of the other things that I want to do is streamline the cyber threat intelligence and research integration. This is a slow and tedious process right now. There's no threat intelligence feed coming into this. It's like, these IoT attacks are occurring, and then it just goes in. And if that means moving off a Git book and putting it somewhere else, building a database, then that can occur too. I'm willing to venture down that path. And then the final part is building a better risk assessment process. Right now, this is just based on what Wes says, not really anything quantitative. So I want to build that out better too. So this is how you actually get involved, and you can go and provide feedback. Each section within the Git book has a little, if you actually hover over the right side of it, it'll pull up a plus sign, and you can basically type in a comment, as long as you have a Git book account, and then it'll push that into the back end for me to see, and then I can take your comment and then integrate it into the framework. So it's quick and easy for everybody. If you want to get more involved in that, then you can always send me an email. And then I can meet up with you and we can talk about getting you an account and getting you hooked into it so you can actually develop it on your own. So one last acronym for you guys. So Patriots was something I came up with recently. I thought this would be cute for the kids too, especially. So patriotic American technologists reinforcing IoT security. So I was talking to somebody the other day, and they were telling me about how they bought a home, and it came with all the smart home stuff built in. I was like, really? And did you ask for that? And they're like, no, it just came with it. I was like, well, that's great. I was like, do you know how to secure any of it? And they're like, no. I don't even know how to update the firmware or anything. So, and it doesn't do it on its own. I was like, well, that's great. So basically what Patriots would be, what the goal of Patriots is to do, is to actually go out and assist the home consumers that need help, especially people that are disabled, people that can't do anything themselves, the elderly who aren't that familiar with technology but might buy a home that has this stuff built in. So we want to create guides that help them to go and fix these things. And then actually go out and give them a hand. So, website, Gitbook, Twitter, and email. You can contact me on Twitter or email. And then, of course, instead of having to write down that long Gitbook, if you just go to homelandofthings.org, there's a link on there. It says Gitbook, and then you can go and grab it from there, and you can get hooked into this. All right, so I got to give out some things. Let's see. So anybody remember what the first botnet I had up there was? What was that?
Mirai?
No.
What you call Mirai?
No, like the first one on the timeline. So
Light something.
light, yeah. Anybody else can add? Okay. So I'm gonna give you the alpha card with the expansion, so you can come get it after we're done.
Who wants to take it?
Yeah, it's over there. The gray shirt.
Okay.
All right, the next one's the USB rubber ducky. So, try to think of something here. See, I got notes that y'all can't see. Man. So I got one for you. What was the first sublayer of the physical network layer? What was the first sublayer of the physical network layer within the HoT framework? Yeah. Is it firmware? It's hardware and firmware.
Where were you? There you go.
Sorry, I'm having trouble thinking of questions. What percentage of attacks or intrusions were password and credential management.
63.
Okay, I gotta ask something different then. I should have known an easy one for me was gonna be an easy one for y'all too. Oh, man.
You can see what you're looking up.
I know, you can see the slides, but you can't see what's in my comments. Yeah, so like this one. Okay, what was the publication that described cyberspace operations? Oh. All right, there's one that's not on there. All right, what was the Army FM that discussed cyber and electronic warfare operations? I may not have said it out loud. Actually, never mind. What was that? Yeah. All right, I got one more. Sorry, I should have had questions ready for you guys before this. There was something I harped on. This is for the book. It's Blue Team Handbook Incident Response Edition. There was something that I harped on about cyberspace and something dealing with the devices. Something that they didn't have to be.
You don't have to have persistent connection.
Yeah, she had her hand up, so I'll give it to her. All right, that's all I got. You guys got any questions? Sorry, I was a little nervous and.
Yeah, you're good.